All right, welcome back to the Week 10 version of the No Quarter Given podcast. Fresh off a bye week, some beach time, some pool time, some whatever time these players like to do on their time off. We are back for another week where we are going to preview the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Washington football team. Not the Redskins, but the football team. Want to welcome back in my co-host, Peter Blake. How'd you enjoy your bye week, Peter?
I did absolutely nothing besides work overtime at my first job. I did no shows besides that. And I think nobody would want to do a show after that disappointing loss versus the Saints a couple weeks ago.
Yep, let's do a quick recap of the New Orleans game. Obviously, the Bucs head into the bye at 6-2. They start the bye week with a I won't say it's a bad loss, but it's a surprising loss in New Orleans. Jameis Winston goes down early in that game to a knee injury, which turns out to be a torn ACL at the hands of Devin White, who then got fined by the NFL. It wasn't a terrible play, but it wasn't a great play either by Devin, the way he tackled him. Unfortunate for Jameis. Trevor Siemian comes to the rescue in the Superdome and bails out the New Orleans Saints. Plays okay. The story of the game, Peter, was the defense of New Orleans stymieing Tom Brady and company.
Yeah, I mean, 3 turnovers, 2 interceptions. Of course, the last one at the end, you feel good about it. But it shouldn't get to that point, should it? I mean, honestly, you take the lead with a big-time play to Grayson. You think you're in control at that point. Your defense has to make a stop. They're not able to make a stop. You give the ball back to the offense. And for some reason, Jason Powers, the Saints have Tom Brady's number.
No, you're right. I mean, Dennis Allen has kind of a very good grasp of what the Buccaneers like to do on offense. And the other key point of that game was penalties and discipline. The Bucs committed several personal fouls, a couple of offside calls that were at critical moments. They give a bunch of automatic first down type of fouls during the game, which enabled Trevor Siemian to not have to do a whole lot offensively because we were gifting them free yards. So, again, like last year before the bye, the Bucs had some discipline and penalty issues. Hopefully, coming out of the bye, like last year, they've cleaned that up and more discipline and more focus heading into the stretch run of the year.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the bye week is much needed. We'll see if this Bucs team can get healthy. You know, it looks like at this point, when we're recording this podcast, that Antonio Brown, Gronk are not going to play in the game, which is somewhat disappointing. The Bucs signed Rashard Perryman and Daniel Fells, so it doesn't.
Carlton Davis still out. Davis still out. But it looks like they're going to get Sherman and Murphy Bunting back in the secondary. So that'll be a big help as far as stabilizing. Because again, if you watch that Saints game the last couple of weeks, people were going after Pierre Desir. They weren't going after Jamel Dean a whole lot, but they were really going after Pierre Desir, and he looked a little overmatched. And it'll be nice to have Sherman and SMB back in the lineup.
I agree, and I believe this team is only going to get better with the help, but they just have to get healthy at this point. And could you imagine if you have Gronk, you have Antonio Brown, and look, Gronk tried to play in this game. He only played 5 snaps. He's not fully healthy. You're not sure when he's going to be healthy.
Right.
Because he has cracked ribs. He has now back spasms, which is a cause of the rib injury. And then on top of it, a punctured lung and then the foot injury. But I think the big story at this point is Chris Godwin didn't practice today, possibly with the foot injury. So we'll watch out for that situation. That could be something that's developing and not necessarily an advantage for the Bucs, but, you know, with all their injuries, still sitting here at 6-2. Ahead of the NFC South. Not too bad.
And remember, Buc fans, last year the Bucs went into the bye, I think it was week 12 or week 13, and haven't lost. They didn't lose another game. They ran the table. So hopefully this is a veteran team. They understand that urgency that there is. They got some help in the NFC last week because Green Bay lost. They had Dallas lose, so they got a little help. They're still 1 game behind Arizona for the number 1 seed, but they got a little help with some other teams losing some games that they probably weren't expected to lose, especially Dallas.
Yeah, Dallas lost, New Orleans lost, the Rams lost, so everything that could go in the Bucs' favor went their way, and the Saints may lose this week because they play the Tennessee Titans, who, by the way, kind of shocked the world without Derrick Henry. They absolutely blew the doors off of the LA Rams in LA. Who would have thought that? I didn't. I lost some money on that game. So thanks a lot, Rams, for showing up. Just saying.
There you go. All right, let's get to Bucs Washington rivalry.
Yes.
11-10 in the favor of Washington over the years. In the regular season, the Bucs own a 2-1 mark in the postseason. We'll hit those couple playoff games, some memorable playoff games. But let's talk about this series first. Before we get to the actual games, a couple names I want to throw out you that have some connections to both the Buccaneers and the Washington franchise. Joe Gibbs and Jay Gruden. Joe Gibbs back in the 70s was an assistant coach for the Buccaneers, was the offensive coordinator at one time. The Bucs let him out of the building as an assistant. Obviously, he went on to great things with the run he had with the Redskins in the 80s and the 90s. He then came back for a second stint in the late 90s with the Redskins, now the football team. But Jay Gruden, obviously, with the relationship to John, he then became the head coach of Washington for, I think he was there 5 years, and then he got fired and let go. But a couple interesting names that have got some connections to both franchises as head coaches.
And the biggest connection there, I always think about Joe Gibbs and his work with Doug Williams. And then when the Bucs let him go, of course, for a contract dispute, he goes on to the USFL. The Washington Redskins at the time have an injury. Doug Williams fills in. And, of course, he goes on to win the Super Bowl for his former offensive coordinator that the Bucs let out of the building. So just another memory down the memory lane, if you will, nightmare on Elm Street Lane for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers with Joe Gibbs and Doug Williams. You're happy for Doug Williams, but
oh yeah,
oh man, you didn't want to see you wanted to see Doug Williams do that with the Bucs. What could have been? What could have been, Jason?
And you can't. I mean, you can't kill the Bucs for the Joe Gibbs deal because at the time John McKay was the coach. Gibbs wasn't good. I mean, Gibbs obviously had other aspirations to be a head coach, and obviously they weren't going to fire John McKay at that time, at that point in the franchise to give Joe Gibbs the job. So good for Joe Gibbs that he made that he had such a great career as a head coach in Washington, on two different occasions. But I can't kill the Buccaneers for letting Joe Gibbs out of the building. Just ironic.
Yeah, it's ironic, but you could definitely kill him for letting Doug Williams out of the building.
Yes, absolutely. No doubt.
They had no chance, Jason, to make the playoffs at that point. In fact, it was the downward spiral of your Tampa Bay Buccaneers once Williams left the building.
Well, and remember that was a Hugh Culverhouse who was the owner at the time. He obviously had some skeletons in his closet related to racism and that kind of thing. So that probably played a big role in that. Was obviously Doug Williams at the time was probably the most productive black quarterback in the league. The Bucs didn't want to pay Doug. Doug ended up going to the USFL, the Arizona Wranglers, and then he came back to Washington when the USFL folded because the Buccaneers refused to pay him when he had proven by taking the Bucs to the playoffs numerous times that he was worthy of a pretty good contract as a quarterback.
What was it, like something like $250,000?
Yeah, I mean something, and again, Hugh Culverhouse, to me, was probably more of a sense that Doug Williams was a black quarterback more so than, because if Doug Williams was a white quarterback, I bet Doug Williams gets the money in 82, 83 when he left to go to the USFL. I bet he'd have got paid if he was Doug Williams, the white quarterback.
Yeah, just cheap. Culverhouse cheap, and not a good thing. And of course, Culverhouse known for Bo Jackson too. Well,
yes, exactly. Yeah. All right, 1982, Tampa Stadium in a monsoon. I know I sure don't remember that. We lost to the Redskins 21-13. The game was marred by 4 fumbles by the Buccaneers, and ironically, it was the last game before the 1982 strike.
I don't remember it either. I don't know, but it sounds like Buccaneer football back then with all the fumbles. And again, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 1950s, 1920s. Jason Powers, if you turn over the ball, you have no chance to win. None.
Correct. No, you are right about that.
In that aspect. In fact, it's gotten even more. There's been even more of an emphasis, if you will, on turning over the ball.
And remember, 1982, and here's another kind of interesting thing with Washington, a correlation. I think in both strike years, 82 and 87, the Washington football team won the Super Bowl both years, if I'm correct. And I think I'm right that they won the Super Bowl in 82 when there was a strike. In 1987, there was another strike, and Washington won the Super Bowl, and again in 87. So I think I'm right on that. And then they won again in 90.
I think
Yep.
It's, who the running back at the time was who? John Riggins.
John Riggins, and yep. You remember the famous run in the Super Bowl against the Dolphins, I believe. Yeah. And then 87, you had, I think that was Mark Rippon. No, Rippon was might be 91. No, 87 was Doug Williams.
87 was Doug Williams.
Yep. And then Mark Rippon, they had a great team in 91 when they won the Super Bowl with Joe Gibbs as well. So
91 or 92 versus the Bills.
Yeah, one of those. Yeah, no, because 91 was in Tampa, was the Giants in Buffalo. I remember that because I actually worked that game as a vendor at Tampa Stadium. I sold sodas at the 91 Super Bowl, the Desert Storm, Whitney Houston Super Bowl. Oh. I was walking up and down Tampa Stadium slinging sodas to make a couple dollars as a high school senior.
There you go, man. You're doing it. You're living the dream right there.
That's it, man.
Slinging sodas, and now look at you. we're still slinging sodas.
But let me tell you something, brother. When we had those 1 o'clock games, it was so damn hot in that stadium, walking up and down those steps, man, carrying 2 and 3. I was literally carrying 2 and 3 racks of these metal racks of sodas. I mean, I was humping it, man. And not making a lot of money.
Well, look, hey, I know how you feel because I was our good buddy TJ Reeves was calling me the mule the other day because I was humping around all that equipment, big laptop, big lights, all this other stuff. I felt like it was gonna fall down. Of course, we went out to the Fury Paul press conference, which was amazing, but parking about 10 minutes away, it was still a little bit hot. I thought it was going to be cooler. I had my suit on.
You were styling and profiling, brother, like the nature boy. Woo!
I was about to be a nature boy, about to be a nature hike at that point from the parking garage to Amalie Arena. So, yeah, it was interesting to say the least. So I know how you feel. I definitely know how you feel when it comes to putting all that stuff on your back or having to carry large quantities of things. Man, it just becomes very.
Hey, nothing like some good hard work, my brother. It'll all pay off for us.
Oh, absolutely, it will. And you get a workout in the process. Leg workout. You skip a leg day, there you go.
There you go. All right, 1994, the Bucs get their first W against the franchise. Mr. Eric Rhett ran for 192 yards. Our man, he used to have the famous, remember, look, he'd have to look at me, the famous famous Q dog from Florida Gator signal after every time he scored a touchdown. Eric Rhett was a very solid running back in the day for the Buccaneer franchise. And he was a heck of a little running back for the Bucs.
He really was a heck of a running back. I remember this game, and of course it was on the radio at the time. They were giving him the ball over and over again. I believe he also had Craig Erickson in the controls as the quarterback. And yeah, I tell you right now, what could have been if Eric Rhett doesn't have that holdout, because of course he has the holdout. He's never the same running back. And then eventually it leads to the drafting of a Warwick Dunn and, of course,
right. Yep, so, no doubt.
But everybody was comparing him when he was running for the Bucs at the time. I remember this because, as sports broadcasters, sports people, sports fans, we always do these comparisons, and they could be, somewhat asinine. They were comparing him the next Emmitt Smith, what he was doing because he was out of Florida. He was
right.
Of course, he wasn't Emmitt Smith, but for the Bucs, during those couple years,
man, he was durable. He was durable. They gave him the ball a lot.
Oh yeah. Yep. I like the pick too. Even though I'm not a Florida fan, I know how productive he was with the Gators, so I didn't have any complaints on that pick at all.
No doubt. Interesting quirk in the schedule that year in '94. They actually played Washington twice 2 weeks later, and the Bucs won again up in D.C. 17-14. So, that was kind of the middle of the Sam Weiss era. The Bucs thought they were getting some things going with Sam. The Redskins were kind of up and down with Joe Gibbs still. I'm not sure if Gibbs had left yet, because I know Gibbs left in the early 90s, maybe a year or so after that Super Bowl. He might have been gone at that point, but the Bucs go up there and win 17-14 again in 1994.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And what a weird time. I mean, a weird quirk in the schedule. You have to play the Redskins twice. I mean,
right.
It's crazy. I never thought about that, but yeah, at that point, and never think about it, honestly.
Yeah, I have no idea what caused all that, but yeah, because they weren't in our division. It wasn't a division issue, but who knows?
I don't know, but I remember Gibbs coming back the second time, and I believe that is I'm trying to think, I believe it was the opening game of Gibbs's when he came back. The Bucs were the opening opponent. We'll get to that in probably a little bit.
Yep. 2003, year 2 of John Gruden. Brad Johnson in control. They go up and they thump Washington 35-13. 4 touchdowns for Brad Johnson. Derek Brooks with a pick 6. This was kind of the heyday of the Buccaneers, the defending Super Bowl champions at the time. Washington was kind of down. I think that was kind of the Heath Schuler. He might not have been in that. But the Washington was really going up, was not doing well as a franchise at that time. The Bucs go up and take care of business 35-13.
But you kind of skip one, a really important one in the postseason.
Yep.
This is the January 2000, of course, the 99 year when the Bucs eventually go to the NFC Championship.
Yep.
Washington gets up 13-0, and Sean King is starting at that point, and you're kind of wondering what's going to happen. John Lynch makes a key interception to give the Bucs back that momentum. They go down, score a touchdown, and then they eventually take the lead. Who's the guy on the last play of the game that has the ball for the Washington football team, Washington Redskins?
Wasn't that a botched field goal?
And it was. And who was the guy that was the holder at that point?
Matt Turk.
Nope. Brad Johnson.
Wow.
Brad Johnson was the holder at that point. And, of course, I believe Sapp with the sack to end the game. And I tell you right now, there were a lot of people who thought that Washington could go in there, beat this team.
Yep.
And, of course, when the Bucs got down, again, they weren't an offensive juggernaut. We saw that the very next week versus the Rams. But, once again, it came back to a total team effort, of course, led by that defense, making big-time plays in that game.
And remember the Buccaneers, I think Mike Shula might have been the offensive coordinator at the time still. So, we had the very vanilla offense. Dungy was a proponent of conservative offense. So that was the Buccaneers kind of game, a 14-13 kind of defensive battle.
Yeah.
The same thing in 2005, another defensive battle. The Bucs lose in 2005, 17-10. We held Washington to 120 yards of offense and 41 yards passing, and we lose the game.
Yeah. And it says former Buck Dan Turk sent down a terrible snap and the kick never got away. That was in 2000. So, but I just remember.
I was thinking Matt Turk. Matt Turk was his brother, who was a punter for a long time in the NFL for many years. But you're right, Dan Turk. And I think Dan Turk used to play for the Buccaneers before he went to Washington.
He did. You're absolutely right. And you just you never, you're watching that game and you're thinking, oh no, they got the ball back. They're going to make a play here. It's going to be disastrous. And then of course the defense and Warren Sapp closes the deal and you're like on to the Rams, but man, they survived that. That was a tough game.
Let's go to 2015. Remember, this was the famous Kirk Cousins. Do you like that game? The Bucs were up huge, 24-0 second quarter. Washington comes all the way back to win the game late in the fourth quarter behind Kirk Cousins. The interesting thing about this, remember, everybody thought that Robert Griffin III was going to be the answer in Washington. They drafted him 3rd overall. They traded up for him. Kirk Cousins under Shanahan was a 4th-round draft pick in the same year that they picked Robert Griffin III. So Cousins comes in 2015. Griffin had to have been injured at the time. I think that was the year he blew his knee out. in the playoff game in the previous year, I believe, was the situation why Cousins was playing. But the do you like that game? And that turned Kirk Cousins into a gazillionaire, because remember, the Washington franchise tagged him twice, never gave him a long-term deal. Then he eventually signs, and he's still currently with the Minnesota Vikings. So Kirk Cousins was the do you like that game scenario.
Oh, yeah, and the 24-point deficit, Mike Evans, Jameis Winston. Evans is beasting in this game. You're starting to think as a Bucs fan, man, this is the culmination of something, and that defense was downright dreadful in that game, and you'll never forget it. You'll never forget that game, and, of course, Kirk Cousins at the end of it. You like that? You like that? No, I didn't like it at all. And, of course, the Bucs go on to lose because that defense just couldn't get it done. And it goes back to Lovie Smith. He was hired as a defensive coordinator.
Right.
And it was offensive.
Remember, that was probably the beginning of the end of Lovie. I don't remember what week that game was in, but when you blow a 24-0 lead, and I think they ended up going 2-14 that year.
No, not that year. You're thinking of the first year with Lovie.
Okay. They went, 6-10 in year two with Lovie?
And they're actually 6-6 before they lose Quan Alexander to a 4-game suspension. Because I remember, stupidly on my part, I thought the Bucs could be a playoff team with Jameis Winston, and of course they go 6-10. But it was Sunday, October 25th. I'll never forget.
So mid-year, it was probably week 7, week 8 type deal. But yeah, that was terrible loss for the Buccaneers.
Definitely a contributing factor of why Lovie Smith was
Absolutely.
fired.
All right, let's hit the last game. Obviously, last year was the last playoff game. The Bucs go to Washington in the wild card round. Tom Brady against Taylor Heinecke. Give Heinecke credit; he actually played pretty well in that game. The Bucs ended up. I don't think the game was ever severely in doubt that who was going to win the game. I know the game point wise was close at some times, but the Bucs win the game 31-23. And obviously they head to the next week. They then head to New Orleans for their famous, obviously the New Orleans game and then the Green Bay game. So your thoughts of when you saw Taylor Heinecke versus Tom Brady last year, wild card weekend in Washington.
Well, you think they're going to blow them out. And then, of course, once again, the Washington football team makes it close. But the story of the game coming into it was Chase Young says, I want Tom Brady. And then you remember that offensive line completely shutting him down along with that potent defense. And it was Rob Gronkowski. You remember him playing him on the left side to help out Donovan Smith.
Right.
So you were concerned going into that game, but you just knew Tom Brady and that Bucs game plan, they would have something in store. And they did, and it kind of made me laugh because that whole big-time story that week was Chase Young. I want Tom Brady. I want Tom Brady. Ohio State versus Michigan, and, of course, Tom Brady has the last laugh. And that was also the emergence of Leonard Fournette in that game because the victim of volume and Ronald Jones had an injury. So Leonard Fournette stepped up. It rushed for 93 yards and had a couple catches. So
remember the reason we were on the road. We had a better record than Washington last year, but Washington won the NFC least last year. I think they were 7-9. Was it a 7-9 home team winning the division home game situation?
Correct.
So yeah.
And Fournette, he had over 100 yards from scrimmage in that game. So. And then Sean Murphy-Bunting with another interception. A lot of people are not big Sean Murphy-Bunting fans, but he had an interception in that game, had an interception, of course, in the New Orleans game, which was huge. So the emergence of not only Leonard Fournette, but that defense, especially that back end. You really liked what you saw. And even though Heinecke threw for 300 yards, they made some plays in that game.
They absolutely did. All right, let's get to the game Sunday up in Washington. Again, a rematch. Tom Brady against Taylor Heinecke. Heineke's, he's got the job. Fitzpatrick, we thought was going to be the quarterback, but he got injured in week 1. Who knows if he's coming back at all this year, hip injury. But Heinecke and Brady again, the part of both teams coming off a bye, so they're both going to be well rested. The key to this game, obviously, is protecting Brady with the biggest disappointment. I think one of the biggest disappointing units in the league this year has been the Washington defense.
Yeah, no, the Washington defense is absolutely taking a step back, especially that back end, which is one of the worst in the league. I feel like Tom Brady with that bye week, that rest, getting some players back. You hope that you can get back Gronk. You hope that you can get back an Antonio Brown. With all that being said, with the offensive weapons, Brady should feast. And you're exactly right. It goes back on the onus of protecting Brady, keeping him upright versus that defense, of course, with Chase Young.
No, no. They got a handful of number one picks. They got Jonathan Allen, Chase Young, Montez Sweat, which I think Montez Sweat may be injured. I'll have to check that.
You're right. I don't think he's going to play in this game. He is injured. And then, of course, you also have Daron Payne in the middle. Those
right.
This is out of Alabama.
The Alabama boys coming after the Michigan guy, man. The Michigan man. So tell me what you see. I mean, again, and I think the Buccaneer defense, this is where you want to see the Buccaneer defense. The back end's much healthier. I want to see some discipline out of Devin White and Levante David. Let's stop making these stupid penalties. Play your role, like Todd Bowles likes to say. Play your role in the defense. Don't try to play two guys' role. Play your role.
Yeah, I want to see some ugly football. I mean, I don't care if they win by 10, 15, but if it's a close game, you're running the ball, you're having balance, you're not turning over the ball, you're cleaning up with the penalty situation. Not only the late hits, but also before the whistle, false starts, offsides, stupid penalties. It's time to clean it up, Tampa Bay. When you had that bye week, I think they're going to get it figured out, and they could win this game once again by 10 or 15 points. Even though it's on the road, we'll see what happens, but this Washington football team has been highly disappointing.
Yep.
It's not to say they don't have some weapons that you should worry about. Antonio Gibson at the running back situation, J.D. McKissick, and, of course, Terry McLaurin. So they definitely
McLaurin's the guy you got to keep your eye on. He's a big-time receiver, so you have to make sure you got to pay attention to him, obviously. And, again, who knows we're not sure what the weather's going to be like, but if the weather's decent, I think you'll see the Bucs really come out throwing the ball to try to go after that secondary and those linebackers. And, again, don't be surprised if you see a little bit more of Giovanni Bernard this second half of the year. Because, again, I think he's going to be a weapon as we move towards the playoffs with his ball catching ability out of the backfield.
Yeah, and go back to the last year. You know what the big-time story was? If Mike Evans was going to play in that game, Mike Evans played in that game. He was awesome. The big story this week is Antonio Brown going to play?
He's not.
And is Chris Godwin going to play?
Right. And there was speculation in Tampa, would the Bucs be interested in Odell Beckham Jr.? I don't think that'd be a good fit because he'd be at best the third or fourth option in Tampa. You got Antonio Brown. You just don't have enough room. Scotty Miller's coming back this week, allegedly. You got Tyler Johnson. There's not enough room for OBJ here in Tampa. So,
But if you have injuries, I mean, if you have Brown out and it could be a long-term injury, you have Godwin out. Tyler Johnson, Mike Evans, nice, OBJ, but you're exactly right. What's going to be the cause and effect for the locker room? I have no problems with that because I know Tom Brady has control of that locker room.
Sure.
The same thing with Antonio Brown. The problem with OBJ is as talented as he is, he's inconsistent and he can't stay healthy. I'll be curious to see who he joins. I think it could be the Kansas City Chiefs, honestly.
There's talk of a couple teams, Kansas City, New Orleans, New England, and maybe Seattle. Those are the four kind of front runners for him. I think he's going to go to either New Orleans or New England. Obviously, he has the ties in New Orleans. Both those teams really need a number one receiver. They don't have a receiver that's worth a flip in both those spots. I think those are the two favorites, to be honest with you.
Wings on Kansas City and Green Bay could offer him the veterans minimum. I mean, to me, that situation, I get it in Green Bay. You still got Aaron Rodgers, even with all the protocols being violated by Rodgers. But with all that being said, Green Bay and Kansas City, to me, are the two situations that are a lot better, especially Kansas City. I mean, you think about it, you go to a team that has Patrick Mahomes, you have Tyreek Hill, you have Travis Kelce, New England, rookie quarterback. I don't see that. Seattle, Russell Wilson is coming back this week, so maybe that's a possibility, but he's the third guy there, Jason Powell.
That's the point. He wants to be the number one or two guy. That's why I think New England and New Orleans is the favorite, because he would come in and be the one or two guy there. and he's playing for a contract next year.
He has the opportunity to do that in Kansas City because you have Tyreek Hill on one side, and who do you have on the other? Pringle?
No, but you got Kelsey, who's the
tight end.
Yep.
All
right.
Okay. Have I given it to you?
Score prediction time, Peter Blake. Give me a score.
All right, I'll go Bucs 38-20.
I think you're going to be in that ballpark. I think it's going to be a mid-30s game for the Buccaneers. And you'll the Washington will probably get to 20. They may score a garbage touchdown late to get to 24, 26. But I think the Bucs win by double digits comfortably coming out of the bye week. Tell the fans where we're going to be. Are we going to be Sunday at Ducky's again?
Yeah, we'll be at Ducky Sports Lounge, 1719 West Kennedy Boulevard in Tampa. We'll get you ready about 11:30 because the game is at 1 o'clock. So no primetime games. That means we don't have to be there all day long.
Right.
Being mules and carrying around equipment. So we'll be live on NSPN and, of course, I Love St. Pete on Facebook. And, of course, subscribe to the Sports Web on YouTube. And do 3 things for me, Jason Powers. You know what they are. Bring your passion. Bring your excitement. Just don't bring any nonsense. I'm your host, Peter Blake, giving you something to think about.
That's right. And remember, fans, forward our podcast to your friends. This is all things Bucs. Remember, buckpower.com is your place to go for all things historical related to the Buccaneers. Paul Stewart, the founder of buckpower.com. He's going to be in Tampa in a couple weeks for the Monday night game with the Giants. So I know Peter, us 3 are going to try to we're going to try to all hook up with Paul and have a dinner or lunch or something when he's in town. So it's going to be great to meet. It's going to be great to meet Paul Stewart in person. And go to buckpower.com because we are a part of the buckpower.com podcast network. Obviously, you can check out my podcast, Powers on Sports Podcast. Subscribe, rate, and review. I post our interviews on my YouTube channel, the Powers on Sports YouTube channel. Our interactions on this podcast are posted there as well. So if you want to see Peter and I in person, go to the YouTube page. You can watch us talk back and forth in these same interviews, brother.
Nobody wants to see us at all. Nobody.
Yes, they do, man. The fans want to see us. Damn it.
They definitely want to see us. And with all the big money we're making, we could definitely afford to buy Paul some wings. That's
right, man. Yeah, it's going to be great to see Paul. And again, he's coming over for like 7 or 10 days. He's going to enjoy the Bucs game, and we're definitely going to hook up with Paul. Buckpower.com. We're part of the podcast network. I'm Jason. That's Peter. This is the No Quarter Given podcast. And one more thing, let's go Bucs. Let's get to 7-2, Peter Blake.
Yes, let's go Bucs.
We will see you next week for the next week's episode of the No Quarter Given podcast. We'll see you next week, and let's go Bucs.